All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to SJC Social Justice Forum or virtual forum for 2020. I'm Mr. Wade, and I'll be your host for this event. Before we start, I'm going to ask guys that we mute our microphones, please, and that our cameras are turned on for the duration of the forum. We have three presenters who will be presenting. Each presenter has 20 minutes to present, and then just 2 minutes before the 20 minute time is over, I'm going to just wave this yellow paper to kind of signal you that time is almost up, right? At the end of the presentation, guys, we're going to have 15 minutes per question and answer. And the way it's going to work is that you're going to type your question in the chat section, and Ms. Sabiro, who is our moderator, is going to read that question for the presenter so that they can answer your question. So don't just ask your question, type it in the chat, and Ms. Sabiro will read that question on your behalf. Before we start, we want to ask God to join us. So we want to invite God's presence, and I'm going to call on Mr. Mauro Campos to do a prayer for us. Mr. Campos.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Please join me in prayer as we do the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus, look with tender mercy upon the multitudes of our day who bear the indignities of injustice everywhere. Raise up leaders in every land dedicated to your standards of order, equity, and justice. Grant unto us, Lord Jesus, the grace to be worthy members of your mystical body, laboring unceasingly to fulfill our vocation in the social apostolate of your church. Sharpen our intellects to pierce the pettiness of prejudice, to perceive the beauty of true human brotherhood. Guide our minds to a meaningful understanding of the problems of the poor, of the oppressed, of the unemployed, of all in need of assistance anywhere. Guide our hearts against the subtle lure of earthly things and undue regard for those who possess them. May we hunger and thirst after justice always. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Campos. I'm now going to invite Gordon Lam, who is going to do the national anthem for us, a piano rendition. Can I ask that we stand in reverence for our national anthem? Thank you, Mr. Lam. This year's Social Justice Forum is centered on the theme, the effects of COVID-19 on Belizean community. I'm looking at it from three perspectives: economic impact, educational impact, and of course, the mental health impact. I'm now going to invite our presenters to introduce the biographies of our presenters for this forum. So I'm going to ask Ms. Idoli Leva, Ms. Lisa Alvarez, and Mr. Darcy Salazar to give a biography of our presenters for this morning.
Pleasant good morning, esteemed guests, colleagues, and students. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused the largest global recession in history, and our country Belize is no exception. Today, the virus has spread around the globe, where concerns and issues have grown from the supply of manufactured goods to decreased business in the services sector. To share with us about the effects of the COVID on our Belizean community and the recovery from these shortcomings, it is indeed a pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Leroy Almendares. Dr. Almendares is presently the Executive Director of Beltrade, a post he assumed in 2018. Prior to that, he was an Assistant Professor of Economics and Business at the University of Belize under the Faculty of Management and Social Sciences. He is also the former Director General of Foreign Trade for Belize and the Director of Tariff Administration at the Belize Public Utilities Commission. For over 5 years, he was a visiting professor at the University of Florida's Warrington College of Business, where he lectured on rate-setting methodologies in electricity and water utilities. He was also a consultant for the Inter-American Development Bank and the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Secretariat. He holds a Master of Business from the University of the West Indies, Cavell campus, and a doctorate in organizational leadership from the University of Nova Southeastern University, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. With warmth and sincerity, we welcome you, Dr. Almendares.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me just ask a quick question. Are you introducing the others, or since you have introduced me, it's my turn to go? Is that it?
I think you can go ahead, Dr. Almendares.
Okay, no, I just wanted to check. Okay, I also want to say good morning, and good morning to the teachers. I know Ms. Holland, and of course, Lynette is my former economics student at SJC. So I've known them, and it's a pleasure being here with you today, students, and I hope that our interaction or the sharing will be very beneficial. And please don't take what I just said out of my 20 minutes. But indeed, the COVID-19 has had a great economic impact globally. And of course, it trickled down to us because, the fact that we have to trade, importation, exportation, and also the production of goods and services, we must never forget that it's services as well. But I like to start these kinds of conversations by asking us, where were we on March 23rd when the first case of COVID-19, it was already raging, it had become a pandemic earlier. And we were not, it was just a matter of when, not if, but I remember that first case. And then of course, the immediate actions taken by the government in terms of lockdown. But, and of course that lockdown had its own economic effects, because it means then that in terms of domestic economic activity, international activity, later on the airport was closed. So you know what happened there, and the fact that our tourism industry, which provides or contributes to over 40% to GDP, was so affected. Just imagine the financial resources and the fiscal and monetary challenges that were placed on us, because we still had to find ways of importing and things like that. At Beltrade, because we are also a part of the whole economic strategy. As a matter of fact, I sit on the Economic Stability Subcommittee that is looking at implementing the economic strategy. We decided, because at Beltrade, we have an export function, which means that we have an export Belize unit, we have an investment unit. We are responsible for investment that happens domestically, foreign direct investment and local investment. We are also have the mandate for small business development. And of course, we provide training, and that's where I'm sitting right now at our training center. We provide demand-driven training to make or create greater employability. So we decided to do this survey just to find out really on the ground what was happening, because it's important to get real-time information. So we have, and the presentation is there. I don't think we can cover all of it in the 20 minutes, but this will be available and I'm willing to share it. So whoever, I think it's Ms. Canto, not Canto, it's Lynette who is, right. So if we could just go to this is just a summary of it. So if you could go to the other, right, this is just a summary. We had 158 respondents, but what we wanted to find out is how is the micro, small, and medium enterprise being affected, because this sector contributes over 70% to employment, and therefore it has to contribute a lot, quite a lot to gross domestic product. We found out that 54% of these respondents were really micro enterprises, and that's the small mom and pop. And you know what definition of micro? It's between 2 and 4 employees, including the employer. In terms of small, it's between 5 and 20, 21 to 51 are medium enterprises, and of course we had larger enterprises. So if you take a quick look at this, is a snapshot of the respondent in terms of industry breakdown. Light manufacturing, fisheries and aquaculture, and some of these are priority areas when it comes to investment. So imagine the effect, the impact, and the question then arises, how do you mitigate this kind of impact? Take a look at where we are now. Even though we have reported, I think, over 800 cases, remember we were at 18 cases, and when the economy opened, I think it was July 1st, we saw immediately what started to happen. But at some point we understood that we had to live with this virus. The question is, how do we do it? Ensuring that the health benefits that were gained from that period of time, they were not gone, but then you can't compromise the economic gains that can be had, because if there's a total shutdown of the economy, just think about what could possibly happen. Countries don't go bankrupt, but it simply means that the cost of living in any environment or any economy becomes more expensive. So this is just a snapshot. Real estate and all of those that were affected. So if you could just scroll again, please. And this is what I was saying, 17% for small enterprises, 12% medium, 54%. And that's what I'm saying. Imagine this 54% just closed down simply because, they can't pay rent. You don't have money to buy your inputs to the production process. So that then would create a problem, and 17% of the respondents were large. So that information was very important to us because, again, we did not just do this. There were actions that followed this information that we got. We also discussed this information with our international partners. I also sit as a board member on Caribbean Export, and to discuss how the Caribbean is affected, but how some of the issues that we have can be addressed as well. Next slide, please. So again, this is just a breakdown by industry and size, and you notice it's micro, the micro, small, and medium, and large, and it tells you that whole breakdown. We can take a look at it. Remember, through tourism, there are a lot of value-added services. Really, people, whether it's tour guides, hair braiders, so many employment that was created and has now been affected. So what has happened, of course, we know what will happen. It increases the unemployment rate, the number of people that are unemployed. And so the question is, how do you ensure that there is disposable income? Because it's a disposable income moving around with the economy during, using that multiplier effect. How a dollar generates greater income for the economy. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we look at export analysis. Are you currently exporting a product or service? Because remember now, we know that the more you export, if export is greater than import, then that's a plus. It means you have a positive trade balance. But we have been known to have a trade imbalance because we import more than we export. So having the resources, and during this period of time, I mean, thinking about creative ways, because innovation is important. Finding creative ways to increase our export output so that we have more products to get into other countries, but we must never minimize quality and standard, because the receiving country, they can decide, you know, really, we don't want your product because, and it's a competitive environment. So 26% are exporters and 74% are importers. I mean, non-exporters, which should mean importers, really. And that means that there's a challenge in terms of foreign currency. Where does it come from if most of what we have is domestic activity? Next slide, please. And then the next one was kind of indicate an estimate of the last in export sales from January 2020, because, you know, it started to really, we started to feel the impact. So the last in export sales is shown over there. I mean, on the left-hand side, and the last in export sales by business types, micro, small, medium, and large. It's also shown on the right-hand side. What it means that overall, think about it, our largest export industry is tourism, and with a loss of revenue from there, that is really sales. Many of them have made sales. We know there's a peak and off-peak season, and many times you have to look at the question of, okay, 44%, what then substitutes for that 44%? So just imagine the impact, and you keep hearing it. Revenue is not under collected. It simply means that revenue has declined. So even the government that goes, I mean, amount of revenue that goes to government, knowing we're a tax and spend type of environment, revenue comes through taxation primarily, because it's a private sector that really, really that exports. Government provides the enabling environment. So with a loss of that level of revenue, the impact that it has, you know, on business, on education, and everything else that you can think about. Next slide, please. So this is a summary. Approximately 28% were generally reported that an alternative supply chain was not available. And I believe we know what we're talking here about supply chain. If I get my inputs from outside of the country, then it simply means if that is disrupted, where do I get my inputs from? What I have seen, because if we're talking about the micro, small, and medium enterprise sector, you see now so many people are doing, you know, mask, and mask is now a part of your wardrobe. So people are doing the mask to match. You find logos, face shields are not being done here, testing booths, and quite a number of other things. I've seen ice cream where, you know, really the inputs are domestically, cheesecake or whatever it may be. So what happens then is that final good gets its intermediate inputs from others who were really, that was their final good. But you've found a way by pivoting and becoming creative and innovative, because during this time, that is what is required. If you're not creative and innovative, then of course, the market will not be there and you will not fit. But even with the challenges we have and with that diversification, moving away from your core activity, that diversification has really created opportunities. So remember, if you do SWOT analysis, you take challenges of threats and turn them into opportunities. So we use those challenges to ensure and turn them into opportunities, rather than, you know, really be taken off the market, be stifled, or your business has to be closed because of those challenges. Next slide, please. And then, of course, like I said, you know, we have Belize Invest, a large part of what we do, and primarily most of the investments are in tourism. Agriculture, agro-processing, those are being affected. We have so many small farmers, so many farmers. You have light manufacturing. Energy is another big thing in our portfolio that we were looking at. So in many cases, we would have found out that Were there investment plans? Many would have investment plans. Belize is rich when it comes to investment, and so it's very viable. We have natural advantage, natural resources, but of course you must make sure that we care for them. But all of these things, so imagine now, all of that has been reduced, which means development, and one of the biggest consideration when it comes to investment is really creation of employment. Regenerating, creating employment, which means greater revenue distribution and the national income increases. And we know that national income, gross domestic product, which means that government can set about a realistic budget in order to meet, demands from all sectors. Okay, next slide, please. And then, of course, this again is just prior to COVID, did your business have the following investment plans? Some wanted to expand, some wanted to do new investments, strategic partnerships, because you would hear about joint ventures in your training, in your classes. And then, of course, broken down by different sides, tourism and leisure, etc., because we do encourage joint ventures. We don't so much encourage mergers and acquisitions, but joint ventures. But of course, you would have those kind where you have subsidiaries, and so people can share resources or merger of resources. And that makes you stronger. But all of those things were impacted now. We're 2 days away from the airport reopening. And so that poses its own challenges, but we of course want to make sure that the health risks are minimized and all of that. And some of those people coming in are those who are speculating and want to invest or already have investment on the ground. Next slide, please. Do you currently have or are you seeking any of the following investment incentive programs on Beltrade? We have several of these. We have an MSME enhancement program, which means if you're a micro, small, and medium enterprise and you're registered, you can get some duty exemptions to bring packaging and labeling. Fiscal incentives, where again, if you want to invest, this goes through Beltrade and goes through to the cabinet, and they approve that way. You get again some duty exemptions, but of course, really, and it's the same thing with the designated processing area. These are different forms of investment, once referred to as export processing zones, but we had to do a name change and revise the law because the World Trade Organization said we were in violation. So these are incentives for those who want to invest either locally or primarily, and in different areas, and it creates development. I mean, the economic impact should be great. Okay, next slide, please. Did the enterprise or organization have a business continuity plan before the global pandemic? 55 said yes. 103 said no. So what were plan B? There was no plan B. Nobody even thought about some pandemic coming around. I mean, this is the worst that it has been. Even though we have been able to minimize some of the impact, but the impact has been great economically, and all of us can feel it. In one way or the other, we are feeling the impact. We know that, in terms of the one restrictions that we place on ourselves or are placed on us, that is to ensure, that the well-being is taken care of. But then, at the same time, simultaneously ensuring that there are levels of economic activity, and in this case, domestic economic activity until October the 1st. Okay, next one. So I thought it would take a longer time to get through, but of course we can't discuss all of this. But just to say, because we're talking about the economic impact, I don't know how much more time I have. I think they said 2 minutes I will get the buzz. But to say that since March 23rd, we have seen, and remember up to June 30th, there were still 18 cases. But even with those 18 cases, we know that there were quite a number of restrictions. There were times when on Sundays you couldn't come out. And so the business places, that was revenue loss, but it was for the health marginal benefits to health, which means that the more people that were not impacted, and it remained 18 cases for 53 days until July the 1st, where for some reason people thought they wanted to do some of the same things that they did, which has really impacted because Many thought that really the spread would come from when you started on October the 1st or whenever the airport was open, but we know that that is not really the case. So any of those things have now restricted, 10, the number of people that can gather, the number of people that can go to restaurants. So restaurants are being affected, hostels are being affected. Those who do business with the hotels or the primary source of revenue or from the hotels, for example, they are being affected. The decline in revenue to government, because if your revenue is zero, then you can't pay 20% or 25% at zero, whatever the tax, 1.75% or whatever the tax rate may be. And so it means then that at this point in time, come October the 1st, and I emphasize that because I've heard, I listened to Dr. Manzanero yesterday and heard about how many people are expected to come in over that period of time. And now remember when people used to come in, you didn't have to do these tests, etc., but you have to do rapid tests and the possibility of some form of quarantine. So we hope that because we know we have to live with this virus, we have to find a way to live with it, but we must practice certain behaviors where we don't increase the number of cases, increase the challenges that the health system would face. And remember, the more allocated in terms of funds or revenue or income allocated to that, then it means less is allocated to other things that can help to generate and regenerate in order to create opportunities for greater involvement. So I believe that I will leave it there. I don't know how much time is left. How much time is left, Mason, if you can tell me?
You have 2 more minutes, Dr. Almendarez, or just on the money.
Okay, see, I wanted to make sure I did that. But let me just then say this, that, again, it is a real pleasure being here. And even where I am, I mean, as the executive director of Beltrade, these are things that we continue to talk about. But how do we deal with some of the impacts? It simply means we have to work together. We have to take, make sure that those measures that are out there, that we comply with them, but we must work together. These kind of forums, so important, because believe me, you are the leaders of tomorrow. And these things that I remember when I was your age, and they used to say, gosh, my grandparents made life so much more expensive. The challenges will be greater, but remember, within you reside innovation, right? It resides that innovation, it resides the creativity, and of course, you'll have to be greater risk takers, but of course, mitigating the risk because you have done the necessary analysis to reduce as much uncertainty as possible. So we will have to be doing this together. And remember that the quicker we learn how to live with it, the quicker, because you notice now recovery is over 1,200 people. But there's still over 600 active cases. So there's still things that we need to continue to do. We must take care while we're trying to do our best to create economic activity. So I guess I will leave it there, and if there are any questions afterwards, then we can just answer those questions and add to the discussion. So I want to thank you all very much again for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leroy Almendarez, for that very informative talk on how COVID has affected Belize, from an economic perspective. I'm now going to invite Ms. Lisa Alvarez to introduce our second presenter, Ms. Lisa Alvarez.
Okay, good morning, everyone. In the words of Oprah Winfrey, education is the key to unlocking the world, a passport to freedom. But what happens to education when a crisis such as the COVID-19 pandemic changes traditional teaching? Clearly, we have started yet another chapter in the history of education known as virtual learning, and with any change comes our uncertainties and questions. Here to discuss the educational impact of COVID-19 pandemic, we have Mrs. Adrienne Coleman. Mrs. Adriani Coleman is a digital learning consultant and the owner of Digital Learning and Pedagogical Solutions. Mrs. Coleman has a master's in education, in innovation and learning from the University of South Wales, England. She was a teacher for 17 years at both the high school and primary school level. Now, Mrs. Coleman is diligently assisting schools in Belize with developing their online learning. Please welcome Mrs. Coleman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Alvarez, for that introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. It's my pleasure to present to you. I will share my screen in a bit. Hopefully I can go through everything. Okay, so we're just going to be looking at the educational impact of COVID. Okay, so just a quick little outline. I'll be looking at the technical requirements, the pros and cons of online learning, and tips for a successful year. Okay, so technical requirements, very important that we look at that quickly. I know all of us are online now and doing online learning, and I just wanted to get into this briefly with you. All right, we all have access to different kinds of mobile devices, but the phone and the tablet are not really recommended because it has limited access to all the features that you would need on the Google Classroom platform. Okay, the better recommended devices are the laptop and the desktop. Okay, so just giving you a little inspirational quote: winners are not people who never fail, but they're people who never quit. All right. Okay, so the pros of online learning. All right, and I'll just go through them briefly. Online learning can happen anywhere, anytime, and at any pace. All right, even though you have a structured schedule, you can still pace yourself within classes. The content is there for a limited time, and you can look at it. All right, it creates synergy. Resources and ideas are shared, causing a continuous cycle of sharing, resharing, and developing ideas. You are able to see the ideas of everyone in a way that you probably never had a chance to if you were in a traditional classroom setting. All right, there's high quality dialogue. You have more time to think of your responses. Okay, usually your teachers will give you that extra time to think about what you're going to respond. So it makes the quality of your dialogues very high. All right, it is student-centered. Okay, students tend to like this and they can focus on what is important to them. There's a level playing field. The focus then has shifted from quantity to quality. For example, you know, when you were in class, people maybe watch how you dress and their focus was different. But now that we're all on the screen, the focus has really changed into what you're saying as opposed to what you are wearing or what you're driving, etc. All right. There is access to resources that you never had before. Okay, and of course there's creative teaching. Your teachers have gotten very creative, even the ones who are in the process of learning. So it has made it very creative and different. All right, there are cons, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. Okay, but one of the major cons is equity and access to technology. All right, not everyone can afford the technology. Not everyone maybe has access to technology the way others have. And then, of course, there's the issue of internet access. All right. There's also computer literacy. Everyone is not necessarily at the same level, and that kind of makes it difficult. All right. There are also technological issues that happen. Yes, you may have a laptop, but maybe the battery isn't working too well. It doesn't have enough memory. All right. So that's definitely a con. All right. Some students need to be in class and some students need hands-on. The being behind the screen is not enough for them. All right. So that is definitely a con as well. All right, so our new normal, these are just tips that I will be sharing with you. I know I'm going through a lot of them quickly, but okay, so set a place for learning, all right? Get into that. You have a little area for yourself so that when it's time for you to jump on the laptop or on the desktop, you have an area that is clean, organized, and comfortable. So when you're working, you're in that zone, all right? Make your own schedule. Try to keep a schedule to do your work. It's difficult because you're at home, and when you're at home, you're in home mode, but you can also make a schedule for yourself, all right? Own your learning. Do what it takes, all right? You're not in class anymore, so maybe you don't have access to the teacher like that, but you do have access to other resources. You can reach out virtually to different experts all over the world if you so choose, okay? So take interest in your own learning. Okay, so some tools that I will share with you students, all right? Of course, there are plenty, and I'm sure you know a lot of them, all right? But the first one is Canva, and I also have Genially there, okay? These are websites that can help you create templates. If you do your work in Canva or Genially, you can do a brochure, infographic, a poster, a flyer, a web page, PowerPoint, all right? It really looks nice. They're free. You can use your sjc.bz address to log into these sites, all right? And you can put together very, very professional looking presentations, all right? So that will definitely help you. You have the content, but Canva and Genially, they give you the templates that you need. So you don't have to focus a lot on the design, of course, unless that's what you want. All right, there's also Prezi and Google Slides. All right, you have Google Slides in your apps. That's part of your SJCBZ domain, but you also have Prezi, which is a PowerPoint um, website. All right, it has very, very nice PowerPoints. You put your stuff together in there, it will look very impressive. If you want to record, let's say your teachers ask you to record yourself and to present at the same time, you can do that using Loom or Screencastify. Again, all of these things are free to students, all right? On the internet, if you need an MLA creator, there are those. I know they're not necessarily 100%, but they'll definitely get you a little bit further than perhaps doing it by hand. There are MLA creators, APA creators, Harvard referencing style creators, and they're all free. All right. Google has a host of things that you can use as well. You have Google Scholar. When you're doing your research paper for English, for sociology, for whatever class, Google Scholar is the website of choice, not just Google. So you go in your Google search engine and you type Google Scholar. And when you type that, it will take you to articles that have been peer reviewed, all right? And you can filter what you need from there. Very important for when you're citing your references. Okay, you also have Google Documents. It's almost like Word, but it saves to your drive. You'll have access to it anywhere. The same thing with Google Forms, all right? And the Google Drive that you have from school, it has access, it has unlimited cloud storage for school work. All right, only school work can go in there though. But you can keep all your files organized. All right, so those are just some of the tips. I know I went through a lot of things quickly, but try not to go over the time. Okay, so thank you very much for listening. Okay, it says life is too short to focus on the things you hate. Focus on what you love instead, and that applies to your study. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Coleman, looking at the educational impact on COVID. And now I'm going to invite Mr. Darcy Salazar, who will introduce our third presenter for this morning, talking about the mental health aspect or impact. Mr. Salazar?
Thank you, Mr. Weed. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, go ahead.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. The next presenter is Miss Jennifer Lovell. Miss Jennifer Lovell is a retired lieutenant United States Navy. Yes, United States Navy. And a professional psychotherapist who holds a Master of Science degree in counseling and mental health from Troy State University, and a Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Florida A&M University. She's a certified addictions professional and an internationally certified alcohol and drug professional. Additionally, she's a master trainer for OAS's CICAD and Pro. That would spell, I really don't know how to pronounce that, but that would spell PROCCER. I think it's PROCER, substance abuse counseling program, and a master trainer for parenting partners of the Caribbean. While in Belize, she has been involved in various research projects, worked extensively with at-risk children and victims of trauma, and facilitated numerous workshops, and is the local tutor for the MSc Counseling, University of the West Indies. Ladies and gentlemen, students, teachers, presenters, Miss Jenny Lovell.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invitation. Hi, students. I tailored my presentation to you guys rather than to the entire Belize. I really wanted to talk to you all because I know some young people and I can see the things that they're going through. So I thought I would just bring this to you folks also. Could you go to the next slide, please? I'm not hearing it.
You need to enable it, Lynette, at the bottom.
I'm not in control of it.
Yes, sorry about that. I'm working on it. 1 second.
This is not coming out of my 20 minutes, right?
No, Ms. Love, but it won't come out for 20 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, as much of the world continues on in isolation.
Are you hearing it now?
It started and then it stopped.
Yes, I paused it, sorry.
Oh.
As much of the world continues on in isolation, people working from home, they're trying to figure out things to do with their family, things to figure out how to pass the time. Yeah. Lindsay and Kels, a lot of teachers have been going online and coaches trying to help out their students and their athletes. This one teacher in particular, music teacher, I thought was phenomenal. Not only did she pick up an instrument and decide to help out her student and spread some joy, but she wrote a song, and as inspiration, she was going to share what she's been going through and how it makes her feel while she is in isolation. Have a look.
Hey, so as some of you guys might know, I'm a music teacher, and I found that one of the best ways that I can process the whole transition to online learning and teaching is to write a song. So I wrote a song. I'd like to share that with you guys now. Here we go.
Oh my God, that's awesome. That is.
I was not expecting that.
His veins, Lindsay and Kelsey, are literally popping out of his forehead.
I was not expecting that at all.
No, she was so sweet and like the little guitar thing.
I'm the music
It's the
teacher,
quiet ones you gotta watch
and I
out
found
for.
that one of the best ways that I can process the whole transition to online learning
Again, everybody.
is to write a song. So I wrote a song.
It's a lovely little melody. She makes sure to show the proper chording and fingering to make sure the song is just right. All right, as much of the world continues.
Next slide. Thank you. So a real quick review, because you are young folks, you're just coming out of adolescence, going into young adulthood. Oh my, I need to be able to see the slide, please. If you could put that over a bit. I still can't see it. Hello? Okay, anyway. The adolescent, the stage of development that you folks are in, you are dependent almost on your peers. You need to be in touch with your peers, face-to-face contact. This is how you are able to navigate the adolescent years. This is up through 18 and now through 21. But what's happened to you with this pandemic, you are stuck at home, in the home with your family members. You're not being able to discuss and talk and grow developmentally. And I'm talking about psychologically, emotionally, all these things. You're not able to do this because you are not in school. And we understand you cannot be in school. And so I'm going to show you some things that you can do later on, but I am explaining to you some of the things that are happening to you and why so many of the young people that I come in contact with are depressed. Next slide. Schools are more than just a place where you educate kids. Schools are also a place where they learn socialization skills from their peers, and being in the school environment where there are people there to teach you things like empathy, getting along with each other. So you can go on to the next slide. Oh dear, where are we? I am so lost. Yeah, you've gone too far. I need you to go backwards. Yes. Some needs of adolescence. You've got to be a balance between security and freedom, the need for love, the need for approval, self-expression, self-esteem. All these things are learned from your peers, right? Keep going. The adults still need to give you guidance, and you want that guidance, but you want it to be unobtrusive. You don't want it to be overbearing and where you are unable to handle it because mom checks everything you do, or dad checks everything that you do all the time. You need that to be unobtrusive, but you want the guidance, you want the support without it being overcrowding you. Okay, this is just a slide to say that you need routine, you need structure. And all this stuff to keep it normalcy in your life is just not there. So one of the things that we put here is set a bedtime for yourself. Set a wake-up time for yourself. You need 9 to 10 hours of sleep, but you also need to make sure that you have some structure. So you get up at an hour in the morning and you do that routinely so that when school reopens, you are still in the groove of keeping your hours of sleep and getting up and doing things you need to do. If you don't get enough sleep, what will happen is that you become stressed out. And stress is one of the most, probably one of the worst things that can happen with teens, because it leads to anxiety and other things, right? There's some good habits over here. I didn't want to get into this yet, but since it's here on the slide, let me just use it. You get your 8-9 hours of sleep, wake up early, exercise in the morning, carry your water bottle around. You need to hydrate yourselves. Remember, you all are still growing. This part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, still is growing until you're 26 years old. So you really need to make sure that you are doing all the things to make sure that your prefrontal cortex is protected, and that we will start using that around, it'll finish growing at age 26. So yeah, you get to vote, you get to drink, but your prefrontal cortex is still not fully formed yet. You need to remember that. Focus on your mental health. Meditate or relax every day, right? And drink lots of water, especially after meals. Next slide, please. I can't answer any questions just yet until we finish. Then they will give us a time to answer questions. So I'm giving you some recommendations of things that you can do when you're not doing your homework and you finished your classwork. On weekends, binge on your movies. Netflix, if you pay $28 extra to the smart, you get Netflix on your television. And there's some nice movies here, that you can binge watch. Orange is the New Black is a full set of movies. What do you call it? It's a weekly show. Strange Things, BoJack. I'm not gonna go through them, but there's lots of things you can binge watch on Netflix. Next slide. Pitchfork review is excellent because it also gives you the option of clicking on various music places that play music. So Spotify, there's other things here, and they review the music. So you're not just locked into soca or reggae. I mean, if you want to be locked into soca or reggae, that's fine too. But it gives you options of other good music that's out there. And you can actually go and listen to the different types of music. So I strongly recommend you check out Pitchfork Review. It's a podcast. Also, while you're there, check out some of the other podcasts. There are all kinds of things. Download the app, the podcast app, and then go check out what you're interested in. And podcasts are wonderful. I highly recommend it. Next. So, some of you guys are depressed. I'm not asking. It says that about 10% of the population will be depressed. So in your group right there, count 10%, and that amount of you are definitely currently in depression. So I have a protocol that I want to put here for you, and I think it's a really important one so that you don't need to take antidepressants. I'm a no-go for antidepressants for young people. I think you have to wait until you get a little older because you don't want to become dependent. Am I speaking too fast for anyone? Because sometimes I tend to just like get really, really fast. Slow me down. So the depression protocol addresses sleep. Go to bed at the same time every night and drink a glass of Ovaltine with warm milk. How many of you at Christmas time, when you eat turkey, what happens to the family? Everybody falls asleep. Why? Tryptophan. Well, guess what? Warm milk and Ovaltine gives you the same effect, tryptophan. I don't care if you can't sleep, you have insomnia, you drink some warm milk with Ovaltine 30 minutes before you go to bed and you will sleep. Guaranteed. Okay. Food intake. You don't want your blood sugar level to drop. So you've got to eat every 2 hours. And you don't want to eat big meals because then you'll get really big. What you want to do is eat small little meals, small protein snacks every 2 hours. Start at 6 o'clock if you get up that early, or if you can get up that early. You start off with just like maybe a boiled egg, a fried egg with a slice of toast and your coffee or whatever it is that your drink of choice is. And you do that at 6, and then at 8 o'clock, you'll have a half a banana or a half of an orange, a half a fruit though. And then 2 hours later, you can have a little bit of peanuts or some cheese, something protein. 12 o'clock, you're going to have a small salad, maybe a slice of chicken, something small, guys. What I'm saying is if you are the type of person when you get depressed, you can't eat, this will help you to just eat something small. And guess what? You are going to not have your blood sugar fall to the point where you drop back into depression. The whole idea is for you to be, you are manufacturing dopamine, which is the feel-good stuff that you need to get out of the depression, all right? Exercise, you gotta move, dance. There's a lot of stuff on the television. There's a walking program. Her name is Leslie Sansone. There's dance stuff. There's all kinds of things. There's Qigong, there's yoga, Tai Chi, lots of stuff that you can go do, but move. 30 minutes. You do 30 minutes, you keep you're able to keep your level of exercise, you build up the dopamine, and You'll feel good, I'm telling you. Laughter. You want to watch some meaningless TV for about 30 minutes every day. Turn on Young Sheldon, any of these shows that make you laugh. 30 minutes of laughter. You can do 60 minutes, do 60 minutes, but don't live on the television. All right. But watch some meaningless TV, some belly laughs. You'll see how good you feel afterwards. Active relaxation. On YouTube, there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. You want to do at least 30 minutes of relaxation. Turn on the music, lie on the floor, lie on your bed, lie on your couch, and relax. Relax. Right? Again, builds up your dopamine, serotonin levels. Right? And then finally, get a bottle of B complex. This is what I recommend for young people. B complex is your stress vitamin. Okay? You want to make sure that you're drinking it. Now, if you come from families where you have older people and tell you, mix B complex with scale, tonic, and drink that. And I'm telling you what, there is no way to be depressed or stressed out if you're drinking that stuff, okay? All right, that's the protocol. Next slide, please. How am I doing for time? Next slide.
We have 5 more minutes, Ms. Avell.
Ooh, okay, let's hurry up. This one you can go over by yourself. It's a great, and I'm sorry I had to use it just for children. This lady used it with her child, but you can do it for yourself. You are old enough that you can do this. It was a pandemic experiment that she did, and she used the scientific method. And I put it out there. It's very easy. I put it right down there for you. Go and use it, folks. I'm not going to go through it because I don't have the time. I have more slides. Next slide, please. So I put this in here because guess what? I know some of you are ADD or ADHD. I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, I know you are. Because we have a large number of people in the community and in the world who suffer from this. And the people that are unrecognized are girls and women. But little boys, you know, because they run around, they touch things, and especially old, adults your age, you will sit there and you will do other things, and you touch things, and you start things, and you don't finish things, you never finish stuff, right? Girls will daydream. Young ladies, let me say young ladies, you'll daydream in class quietly. You'll get anxious or feel sad. You'll be doing silly stuff, or you kind of what the people call dizzy, shy or inattentive. You have a real hard time maintaining friendships. Or you'll sit there and play with your fingernails. Or you're a perfectionist. Everything has to be just so for you. You'll really need to get checked for ADD. All right. If you add the hyperactivity to it, then it will be ADHD. And trust me, I know for a fact some of you are in there, and this is why I'm putting it on here, because you get overlooked. You get overlooked. And in this period, in this time, in the stuff that we're going through right now, you really are going to need to pay attention to that particular, what do I want to call it? It's not a disease. It's whatever. Next, by the way, I'm getting over COVID, so I have some brain fog issues, all right? So forgive me. Next one. This right here, again, this is for the person who is, and I'm not going to go through the list. I'd like you to go through the list yourselves, but it's for the boys who are ADHD, and it gives you all the signs and symptoms for boys. And there are 3 things that are really important for you to know. The inattention, the hyperactivity, and the next one, people miss, the impulsivity, all right? And I'm sure you are seeing it right there at the 6th form. I really want the teachers to know that that's happening, and you have to pay more attention, particularly when people are online, because you miss some of these things, but you can see it in their eyes. You can see in their eyes if they're checked out. You can see in their eyes. I've been looking at some of you on right now, and I can see the ones who are ADD. I can see the ones who are maybe depressed, okay? This right here, real quickly, I want to save my time, and I'm put it on, please, please, please. Can we stop the presentation? Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention, and I'm sorry I ran out of time, so.
Thank you, Miss Jenny. I think most of us will be adding that song to our playlist when you started off with earlier. All right, guys. So at this point, we want to thank, of course, three of our presenters. We're now going to open it up for a discussion. What you can do is students type your question in the chat section or the chat box, and we're going to have our moderator, Ms. Sabilo, who will read the questions on your behalf. So again, don't ask your questions, just type it in the chat box, and Ms. Sabilo will select your question and read it on your behalf. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. So several students had took the opportunity to submit a few questions ahead of time. And I'd like to start with one to Miss Coleman. This is in regards to our new way of learning. Miss Sabrina Richards asked, how can educational institutions, especially at the primary level, ensure that distance learning is really effective? And what measures could be put in place for children whose parents are at work all day and have no additional help at home? The nature of the question is in measuring the effectiveness of distance learning. So I believe that would be something that would be able to contribute a little bit further on. Ms. Coleman?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first question was the effectiveness of education at the primary school level. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So it says, how can educational institutions, especially at the primary level, ensure that distance learning is really effective? And what measures can be put in place for children whose parents are at work all day and have no additional help at home? I believe the question is looking at the measuring the effectiveness of this distance learning. Instead of maybe doing just at the primary level, it could be an overview as well to something that applies to us at the sixth form level.
Okay, so that question, Ms. Sabrina, is a very difficult question to answer. This is what the government is trying to figure out, and I can tell you safely, it is not something that is very, very straightforward. The advice that I have given all schools that I've worked with, and I've worked with preschools all up to the junior college level, is that the schools need to find out what will work for their population. Every school has its own population, and each population has their own needs. All right, so the schools will actually have to ask the parents, the students, what are their capabilities, and that is the only way that they can really formulate an effective plan to reach everyone, those without devices, those with devices sometimes, and then like the second half of the question, those without help at home. All right, so I think that is a very, very wide question, but my top advice is that the principals and the administration of these schools poll their populations and find out what are the needs and attempt to address the needs in that school specifically. All right, and if you don't have assistance at home, some of the same tips that I gave about creating a little space for you might not be fancy. It doesn't have to be somewhere you are comfortable, having a schedule that you can stick to. All right, and then also seeking help. There are teachers out here who are retired who wouldn't mind helping. All right, or the teachers can set up the work in such a way that students can access it after, well, the parents can assist the child to access it after work. All right, and that, of course, that's if they're going digital. If they're doing the packages, then they need to reach out to someone if they cannot handle it on their own.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Another question that we like to ask is from Ms. Abigail, and this is directed to Dr. Almendares. Abigail asks, given COVID-19 has really opened our eyes to how much we really depend on tourism, and we can't expect to get a quick recovery to our tourism industry. So can we expect to see our country to shift more towards agriculture and using our own exported goods? Is this something that's seen in the future, that the shift happening?
Well, thank you very much for the question, Ms. Adida. And from the student, I think that one of the things, the reason why I am internalizing it is because we don't want to say just forget tourism. As a matter of fact, come October the 1st, really that's when we'll see what really happens there. My suggestion is that this has taught us that we can't put so much of our focus on one industry. But that same industry was contributing over 40% to gross domestic product. So you could see why there was so much investment and expenditure in the industry. But we also know that one external, or in economics you talk about exogenous shocks, one shock to an industry that did not have the kind of resilience or the level of resilience, you could see what would happen. So it's important now for us to learn not only a shift or a focus on agriculture simultaneously, or a focus on agriculture, but other industries. For example, I'll give you an example. One of the industries that we're building or working on building is seaweed. Who would have thought about it? There's no seaweed farming, and we have some of the best seaweed, and I could see just value-added projects just like tourism. So it means that we have to be looking at creative ways, pivoting, because remember we talk about pivoting, diversification, so we have to be looking at new industries as well. And while other industries are moving from their infancy, we then could focus yes on agriculture. But at some point in time, that tourism product, because think about all those that have invested in tourism already, if we just say, well, just kind of forget about it, then we're creating greater employment and dependency. So it's a matter of looking at the matrix and ensuring that if A is not working, then B should have been there, indeed B or C, because you want to make sure that those economic gaps are filled.
As a follow-up question, Ms. Ayanna Franklin is, to continue on the same topic of conversation, Ms. Ayanna Franklin is asking, how is the government encouraging entrepreneurs or business owners to diversify their products due to the recent economic losses? Again, going back to what you had mentioned with the survey, that a lot of people did not really have a plan B. Was there any type of data previously that reflected that these businesses were encouraged to diversify?
They were, as a matter of fact, but let me quickly say this before I forget, because it should have been included in my presentation. There's this, really, most countries are now trying to put forward some kind of economic stimulus. So you would hear about the Small Business Administration in the United States, for example. In Belize, we have the second phase of the unemployment relief program, and it includes the micro, small, and medium enterprise stimulus package. And so what is included there, as a matter of fact, we have this program, and it's still ongoing, where we are catering to at least 1,800 micro enterprises that were affected. We have disbursed loans to to small and medium enterprises to help. For some of them are talking about how do I prepare. Some of them are in the tourism sector. And there's something called a wage subsidy, where if you retain your employees and they're paying Social Security, there are monies that can help them over rather than just being unemployed, you can remain employed. So that's a stimulus program that is now ongoing. That's a program that the government has put in place. The administrator of the micro, small, and medium enterprise is really Beltrade. So, sorry. In terms of looking at the sector, that's what we have to look at, because I think one of the things I said, and you'll find out globally that over 70% in Central America, it's more than 70% of employment is really generated through the sector. So there has to be a focus on it. Too often we tend to look at the large enterprises and not realizing that these small enterprises, and it's most of them who have pivoted so far. So I just wanted to mention that in fact, there are these programs. It has been successful so far, and we will continue to provide the level of service or this kind of service to this sector. And hopefully, at some point in time, if more funds are available, then you can even, really a greater rollout, because it provides working capital and things like that for them to survive. But don't do the same thing that you were doing if there's no demand for it. Remember, if there's no demand and you can supply all you want, but nobody will buy it. Supply what is being demanded. Just be creative and innovative and take some risk.
And just to add on to that, Dr. Almendaris, if you notice, like the previous example that you mentioned earlier with the wearing of the mask, it's part of our wardrobe, as you said. So you have seen a lot of small businesses, respond to that demand.
This is bell trade. See, this we wear it as a part of our...
Exactly. So like you said, again, responding to that demand, that will ensure the continuity of many businesses. Thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
We have another question, and this is for Miss Jenny. This question is a broad question, so if you would provide just your general observations from dealing with the pandemic, and it asks, what impact can social distancing and isolation have on a person's mental health? You did provide us with a few tips on how to cope with these things, but would you care to elaborate a little bit more of like what impact would it have on our mental health?
Especially for young people, not being able to, oh, you ever watch young people? When they meet up, they hug, but now they bump. But that entire, they need that touch. They need to be able to go up and talk to each other, and it's affecting them in terms of depression. I'm talking emotionally. I'm seeing so many young people who are depressed, who are suffering from anxiety attacks. I'm worried about their social skills when they are able to go back and be as a group. Just how balanced they're going to be. I'm really concerned as a professional working out there as to how they are going to be able to regroup and come back into the classroom, into their circles. It's going to be some long-term problems, and we are expecting to see problems starting in December. That's when we're really expecting to see stuff happen, because in December, that's when we have Christmas, that's all the holidays, that's all the family things, getting with friends. And I am just praying that people are able to hold on for just a bit longer, hopefully till next year, or when they get a vaccination, and not just go out and decide they're going to blow it off and not wear the mask, not to adhere to the social distancing. If you really need to talk with people, I really suggest you go to your school counselors, go sit down and talk through the anxieties, talk through the depression. Very, very important. And for ladies, for women tend to, because of, I'm going on to later, because women are socialized to emote and socialized to talk through things, women tend to show the depression more openly than men. It's not that men don't get depressed. I would suspect that men get as depressed as women, but they hide it. They stuff it, and they will come and bring it out as anger instead of being depressed. We are socialized to be more of the feeling, touchy-feely kinds of things. I hope that answered your question. I know I went around in a big circle.
No, I believe it was covered, Ms. Jenny. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we are out of time for questions. However, we've had quite a few number of questions come in. This is a topic that students are very interested in, not only in the economic impact, but as well as the educational impact, and in particular, the mental health impact. So like I mentioned, unfortunately, we are out of time, but what I'll be doing is that I'll be taking out all the questions that were not answered and forwarding them to the presenters and asking for their response or their assistance to provide the response to the students back, because like I mentioned, these are very important questions that students have a keen interest in being answered. Thank you so much. And that will be closing off the question and answer section for now.
Thank you, Ms. Sabido. So students, as Ms. Sabido mentioned, she will take a note of the messages you have in the chat box. She will forward it to the relevant presenter and you will get your response to your questions. So you don't need to worry about that. At this time then, I'm going to call on Ms. Yupe Lin to do a formal thank you to our presenters for today. Ms. Yupe.
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of SJC, JC faculty and students, I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Armendariz, Mrs. Coleman, and Ms. Lovell for your educational and informative presentation. And hence, I would like to present gifts as a token of our appreciations. All right, so we have 3 gifts, and then this will be delivered to your office later during the week, I think. Okay, yeah, so this is the gift, a photo shirt for SJC photo shirt for all our guest speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yupe. And again, Dr. Almendares, Mrs. Coleman, and Ms. Jenny, thank you for your time. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email address here in the chat for the presenters. And what you can do is email me your presentation so we can have it on record. And if the students to review it or receipt, then they have something to look at. So in the chat is my email, and you can just forward your presentations to me that you presented on today.
All right, thanks, Mason. I sent mine to Ms. Sabita, so she can share mine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mr.
I sent mine too.
Yes, so I have Dr. Almendaris and Ms. Jenny's.
Okay.
You need Ms. Coleman's.
Yes, just that one.
And thank you all again for the invitation. Thank you, Ms. Mulwa. It was a real pleasure being here, and I hope we can continue to share.
Thank you all presenters and students.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you too. Have a great day, everybody.
Have a good lunch.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
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 Thank you very much.